Hey everyone! If you've ever tried reading ancient texts and thought, man, this is just really hard to digest, or maybe struggled to connect them with your modern life, well, you are definitely not alone. Today, we're jumping right into an explainer on something absolutely fascinating. We're looking at how Teacher Lu's cinematic poetry actually transforms dense, ancient biblical history into this incredibly immersive audiovisual experience. We're going to explore a revolutionary artistic method that takes foundational scriptures, specifically diving into the profound spiritual meanings within Genesis and Deuteronomy, and turns them into a vivid, multisensory journey. This isn't just about reading words on a page, it's about fully experiencing the eternal covenant between God and humanity.
So here's our roadmap for today. We'll be touching on cinematic poetry and art, the timeline of creation, redemption, and covenant, this powerful idea of identity awakening, how to use all this as an immersive daily devotional, and finally, is global spread and mission. Let's get right into it. All right, starting off with section 1, cinematic poetry and art, or how we turn dense laws into literal blockbuster experiences. You know, traditional reading of scripture can honestly feel a bit dry sometimes, right? Like a purely intellectual exercise that's hard to stay focused on. But people engaging with this new art form, they're describing it as watching a 3D blockbuster movie that literally brings the text to life right in front of them. By weaving together really rich, condensed lyrics, beautiful melodies, and these stunning visual posters, incredibly complex texts, like the dense laws in Deuteronomy, for example, suddenly become super accessible. It's like this audiovisual method totally bypasses those intellectual roadblocks and just hits you straight in the heart, making ancient laws of obedience and blessing feel urgent and vibrantly alive today. And just listen to this quote. Participants are literally saying it feels just like being immersed in a movie blockbuster. They're not just passively listening to a song. They are experiencing a full-blown cinematic journey in their minds. All that chaotic noise from our modern lives just kind of fades out, and they talk about feeling their true spiritual identity being washed and awakened. It's a deeply visceral, emotional response that, let's be real, you rarely get from just staring at a black and white page. Moving on to section 2, creation, redemption, and covenant, where we trace God's sovereign timeline. Now, what's crucial to understand here is that this isn't just some random collection of pretty songs. It's actually this brilliant, structured master timeline. It kicks off in Genesis, really capturing the massive scale of creation and the absolute spiritual weight of that very first covenant. Then, we travel through the dark, cyclical rebellion seen in Judges, shift beautifully into the intimate grace and redemption found in Ruth, and finally arrive at the establishment of kingship and the heart's alignment in Samuel. It just beautifully threads the needle, showing exactly how God is sovereignly orchestrating human history across thousands of years. Take a look at these stunning lyrics from the Genesis portion. Wow, right? It really drives home that this isn't just a nice story, it is the dawn of an eternal covenant. It's an inescapable mark, a divine contract connecting God and humanity that has literally outlasted the rise and fall of empires. This poetry really highlights that every single one of us is a part of this ancient bloodline, which honestly gives so much profound spiritual meaning to our individual lives today. And then we hit the book of Judges. Talk about a roller coaster. It illustrates this endless cyclical loop of rebellion where people just did whatever they wanted, ended up oppressed, cried out for help, and then boom, were met with God's nail-scarred hands of mercy. Even in an era of deep chaos where society had completely lost its moral compass, this poetry reveals that God was still relentlessly pursuing his people. It's such a powerful reminder that divine grace usually shows up exactly when we're at our absolute lowest, most rebellious points. Okay, section 3, identity awakening as rock. This is the psychological and spiritual anchor of the whole experience. So what exactly is identity awakening? Well, participants actually pointed out that without this core realization, everything else is just, nice music. In chaotic times, whether that's historical turbulence or just your own personal crisis, we're all desperately looking for solid ground to stand on, right? This cinematic poetry actually acts as a catalyst for that awakening. It reminds you of who you truly are on a massive cosmic scale. Once you realize your identity is completely rooted in that eternal covenant we talked about earlier, it becomes your bedrock. You're no longer just getting tossed around by all the crazy anxieties of the modern world. This concept builds so perfectly on the lessons from Samuel and David. As the quote says, man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. I mean, our world is absolutely obsessed with outward appearances, wealth, and titles, isn't it? But when your identity is truly awakened, you kind of just stop performing for the world. You start living authentically from much higher calling. It's a total paradigm shift from needing outward validation to having this deep, inward spiritual confidence.
Let's dive into Section 4. Immersive spiritual devotional. It's wonderful to be moved by a piece of music, but how does it actually change our Tuesday mornings? Let's look at the guide for daily reflection.
So here's the million-dollar question. How does this poetic approach actually change a believer's daily practice? Like, how do we go from a boring, routine reading to full-on spiritual immersion? Because let's face it, sometimes traditional reading can feel like just another box to check off. But people using these songs are saying that just putting the tracks on completely alters their environment, instantly dropping them into this really deep, focused space for reflection. And it's definitely not passive listening. It's a very intentional step-by-step process. Step 1, you immerse yourself in the audio visuals. Step 2, you reflect and really chew on that condensed theology in the lyrics. And finally, and this is absolutely crucial, step 3, you align. This is where the magic happens. You align your daily earthly actions straight up with your heavenly mission. This devotional guides you to realize that whatever you're doing today on earth, your 9-to-5 job, raising your kids, whatever, it is all intimately tied to what you'll be doing in eternity. The everyday stuff becomes part of this grander heavenly calling. I just absolutely love this quote from the Ruth section. In the most difficult years, there is always loving kindness bringing completion. No need for thunder and lightning, just follow gently. Doesn't that just perfectly capture the vibe of this devotional practice? It's comforting. It reminds us that not every spiritual moment needs to be this crazy, dramatic mountaintop revelation. Sometimes the deepest identity awakening happens in the really quiet, gentle moments of following a daily devotional. It literally trains believers to spot grace and loving kindness in their ordinary, everyday lives. And finally, Section 5, Global Spread and Mission, Breaking Borders with Heavenly Songs. Because when people experience something this transformative, they simply cannot keep it to themselves. Now, we're looking at a huge challenge here. Complex theology usually gets stuck behind these massive cultural and linguistic walls. So what's the strategy to break through? Cinematic poetry. It's essentially acting as a universal language. By breaking down these super deep theological concepts into emotional, visual, and musical experiences, they are totally blowing past borders that traditional methods have always struggled with. It's honestly a complete game changer. And this isn't just happening by accident. There's a highly deliberate game plan here. They are translating lyrics into multiple diverse languages, sending out these incredibly rich visual posters, and sharing everything across digital borders. The ultimate goal? To awaken believers globally. It's this incredibly strategic push to build a unified, worldwide community that's all anchored to that exact same spiritual rock, completely breaking through any cultural barrier in their way. This heavenly song should belong to the whole world. It cannot be confined by national borders. When you hear a participant say something like that, you really feel the urgent missionary zeal that this art sparks. As a witness who's been totally changed by this experience, their immediate reflex is, wow, I have to share this. They realize this isn't just for their local community, it's a universal remedy for a really chaotic world. It literally ignites this deep, driving mission to get this light out to every single corner of the globe. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with something to really chew on for your own spiritual journey. We've seen how this cinematic poetry takes the densest ancient texts and flips them into this immersive, life-altering experience. We've seen how it anchors our identity and bridges our regular earthly days to these grand heavenly missions. The tools are right here. The art is waiting. So the only question left is, how will you answer the call and let it awaken your own story? Thanks so much for diving into this fascinating subject with me today. Keep exploring, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.